If your marriage had no rules, who would be the first to cross the line with a knife? Right arrow. Subscribe now to follow the dark line between desire and destruction. Vanessa Hart's life wasn't a lie. It was, perhaps, an experiment, one conducted beneath the neon glow of Las Vegas, a city that pulsed with indulgence and whispered promises in every corner. Her marriage to Brian had once been simple, sincere, 11 years of loyalty, laughter, shared nights, and mundane routines. But something broke 2 years ago. A betrayal, a late-night text, a mistake, confessed tearfully and forgiven with open wounds and a new deal. An open marriage. It wasn't Vanessa's idea, nor fully Brian's. It was born from desperation. From a hope that permission would erase temptation. 3 rules. Always be honest, never bring someone home, and never, under any circumstances, fall in love. Vanessa had thrived under those rules. Or, at least, she convinced herself she did. With her work as a freelance HR consultant, she had freedom, flexibility. She told Brian she rented the Airbnb downtown for late-night projects, Zoom calls, and solitude. He didn't question her. At first, Brian had changed, not drastically, but in subtle, soul-deep ways. He used to meet her with full embraces, the kind that folded her into his chest. Now, his hugs were brief, one arm, half a smile. His eyes didn't hold hers long anymore. And yet, he never accused, never confronted, just drifted. Vanessa filled that silence with noise. With people, with Travis. Travis was different, younger by a few years. A gym instructor who spoke with his hands and made her laugh too easily. He didn't ask about Brian. She never brought him up. The Airbnb became their space. Weekly, then bi-weekly, then whenever the ache became too sharp. She told herself it was physical, temporary. She told herself she still loved Brian, that she still respected the rules. But sometimes, when she lay beside Travis, she didn't rush to check her phone. She didn't feel the guilt clawing at her ribs like it used to. She would lie there, let her hair fall over his chest, and listen to his breathing like it was a lullaby. And then she'd go home. Home was quieter now. Brian made dinner less often. He stopped playing their favorite records. He'd go to bed early, or stay up watching fire department training footage. Eyes glazed. She asked him once, softly, "Are we okay?" He nodded. "We're doing what we said we'd do." And that was the end of it. But Vanessa felt it, the growing distance, not a chasm, but a slow stretch, like dough pulled too thin. She thought the arrangement gave her freedom, but sometimes, freedom felt like being alone in a vast room with too many doors and no maps. One Thursday night, she returned home after a 3-day retreat. Brian was sitting on the back porch, nursing a beer. He looked at her the way a firefighter looks at smoke, calmly, knowingly, and with the awareness that fire might be near. "Everything go well?" he asked. "Fine. The client wants a second draft. You working with them again soon?" "Maybe, I don't know." Silence stretched. The city murmured beyond their backyard. Neon shimmered in the air like distant fireflies. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" she asked. "The rental tour. You said the pool was too small, but I loved the way the light came through the kitchen in the morning." He took a sip. "Yeah, I remember." His voice wasn't angry, just tired. She wanted to reach for him, but didn't. Instead, she went inside and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her skin was flushed from wine. Her lipstick faded. Her eyes didn't look like they used to. Not curious, not kind, just tired, distant, like Brian's. She turned on the shower and let the water burn. That night, she dreamed of falling, not from a building or a cliff. Just falling, into water, into space, into something that never ended. When she woke, Brian was already gone. His side of the bed was cold. She made coffee, scrolled her phone, ignored Travis's text. Last night was perfect. When can I see you again? Instead, she opened her laptop and stared at the empty document for her client. The cursor blinked, patient and unforgiving. She closed it, went back to the Airbnb. Told herself it was just for a night. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice asked, "And what if it isn't?" The city pulsed outside. And inside, in the sterile white room she called her writing space, Vanessa felt something shift, just slightly, like the moment before a ceiling gives out. Something in her life was cracking. But she wasn't ready to see it. Not yet. The night Vanessa came home late, the first thing Brian noticed wasn't the time. It was her hair. It was messy in a way it rarely was unless she had fallen asleep in a car or… He tried not to finish that thought. She didn't greet him with a kiss. Just a tired smile, a few mumbled words about a deadline. And then she walked straight into the bedroom. Brian stood in the kitchen, the glow of the fridge spilling across the floor. He heard the water run in the bathroom. Something about the way she moved, so automatic, so uninvested, made his stomach twist, but he said nothing. He wasn't the jealous type. Not anymore. That emotion had already burned its way through his system like a fever. Back when the affair first happened. When he forgave her. When he agreed to try this arrangement. When he told himself it was better to have half of her than none. But this was different. This wasn't freedom. This was distance. Like she'd left weeks ago and only now bothered to return physically. Later, as he gathered laundry from the hamper, his hand brushed against something damp. He pulled out a towel. Crimson, faded and washed out, but unmistakably blood. "Vanessa?" he called. Her voice came muffled from the bedroom. "Yeah, were you hurt?" "Hurt?" There was a pause. Then she called back. "Oh, no, I was opening a bottle of wine and the foil cutter slipped. Just a nick." He stared at the towel a moment longer, then folded it as if it were ordinary. He didn't ask more. The next morning, the doorbell rang. It was their neighbor, Gina, who lived across the street. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, passing him her phone. "I didn't want to gossip." But it was a photo. A grainy shot taken from across the street. Police lights. 2 squad cars parked outside the Airbnb Vanessa rented. Timestamp, 12:14 a.m. the previous night. Brian felt a flash of cold run through his chest. "Any idea what happened?" Gina asked. He handed her phone back. "No, I'm sure it's nothing." He closed the door gently, then stood there for several seconds. Vanessa was still asleep. He didn't confront her. He didn't mention the towel again, or the photo, or the fact that she had lied. Instead, he began to watch every gesture, every hesitation, every unsent text she typed when she thought he wasn't looking. That evening, over dinner, she picked at her food. He noticed her fingernails were cleaner than usual. Scrubbed, almost too clean. "You okay?" he asked casually. She looked up, startled. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, said nothing more, but the silence between them thickened. She stared past him, toward the television that wasn't turned on. Later that night, as she showered, he opened her laptop. He didn't guess her password. He didn't have to. She never changed it. The desktop was filled with work documents. But a folder in the bottom corner, labeled, "Drafts," caught his eye. Inside, journal entries, not dated, just blocks of text. One read, "I don't know what I want. I thought Travis was the answer to something. Maybe he's just another wrong question. I keep thinking about the blood. About what I did. I want to forget." Brian stared at the screen until the water stopped running. He closed the laptop gently and returned to the living room. Picked up a book he didn't read. Heard her footsteps padding across the hallway. The bedroom door shutting softly behind her. She hadn't said goodnight. He sat for another hour. Then 2. Then finally walked to their room. Climbed into bed beside her. And stared at the ceiling while she slept. He didn't sleep. The image of flashing police lights burned behind his eyes. The towel, the journal, the lie. And still, he said nothing, because part of him didn't want to know. Not yet. Part of him wanted to preserve the illusion a little longer. The fragile piece, the illusion of choice. But something had begun. A shift, like a crack in the wall that seems cosmetic, until you realize it runs through the foundation. And something inside Brian told him, the house was starting to come down. Brian had been trained to assess threats calmly. In fires, Every second mattered. In emergencies, emotions were liabilities, but nothing in his firefighting career had prepared him for this kind of slow-burning disaster. Nothing taught him what to do when the fire was inside his own home. He started with the facts. Vanessa claimed she used the Airbnb for freelance projects. Usually on weekends. She said she needed silence. Clarity. Brian had never questioned it. Until now. He pulled out the app they used to track their calendars and began cross-referencing her bookings. The frequency was off. She had stayed there more often than she'd told him. Sometimes on weekdays. Sometimes during his overnight shifts. He downloaded a GPS tracker app on his phone, quietly syncing it to hers while she slept. It wasn't just paranoia now, it was evidence gathering. 3 days later, while she was at the Airbnb again, he drove by after his morning shift. Her car was parked out front. So was another, a silver SUV he didn't recognize. Brian parked across the street and waited. 2 hours passed. Then the door opened. Vanessa stepped out, laughing. A man followed, younger than Brian, but not by much, fit, confident, wearing a firefighter t-shirt. Brian's stomach twisted into something cold. He knew that man, Travis Carmichael. They'd been rookies together. Brian hadn't seen him in years. He remembered their drills, the long overnight shifts, the camaraderie. Travis had moved to California. Brian thought he'd lost touch. Apparently not. Vanessa kissed Travis quickly on the cheek. He swatted her playfully on the hip. Then they both went back inside. Brian didn't follow them, not yet. Instead, he waited until they left again. That evening, after Vanessa had returned home claiming a burnout day from writing, Brian went back to the apartment. The manager at the front desk was easy to charm. Brian was still in uniform. "Forgot something my wife left," he said. "She's been staying here for work." The manager gave him a spare key without a second thought. Inside, the air still smelled like cologne. Not his. There was a wine glass on the nightstand, lipstick stains, a used towel on the floor, a bottle of bourbon, half drunk, and on the edge of the bathroom sink, a pair of men's underwear. Brian didn't touch anything. He simply stood in the center of the room, taking it in. The scene felt like a ghost story told in objects. Every item a sentence, every stain a confession. Then, near the edge of the kitchen counter, he saw it, a smear of dried blood. Small, almost missed. He stared at it for a long time, then took a photo. That night, he didn't ask Vanessa anything. He just watched her wash dishes. The way she hummed slightly. The way her eyes flickered when he walked past. He noticed the way she avoided his gaze, like someone waiting for a trap to be sprung. Instead, he kept reading. He scoured the shared eCloud. Old backups, notes, messages, even deleted ones. That's where he found it. An unsent draft from Vanessa to someone named T. It read, "I know he'll never forgive me. Not if he finds out it was you. But I needed to feel something alive. I needed to feel like I still existed. I'm scared you're more dangerous than I thought." Brian saved the message. Screenshot. Backup. USB copy. He called a lawyer the next day. "What are my rights if my spouse breaks the conditions of an open marriage?" he asked. The lawyer paused. "Depends. Did you have anything in writing?" Brian sighed. "Just rules. Verbal agreements. No emotion. No lies. No one we both know." "Then you might have something," the lawyer said, "especially if there's evidence of danger or manipulation." Brian gathered everything: photos, emails, timestamps. He wrote it all out like an incident report. Each paragraph precise, clinical, like a post-fire analysis. He learned that Travis had been discharged from service after a misconduct investigation. He'd left California abruptly 2 years ago. No record of charges, but enough whispers to raise flags. Vanessa never mentioned any of this. One night, while she slept, Brian stood beside their bed and watched her. The way her hand curled beneath her cheek. The way her breath hitched when she dreamed. She looked innocent, but he knew better now. She hadn't just broken the rules. She had rewritten them without telling him. And worse, She had invited a predator into their lives. The next morning, Vanessa smiled at him over breakfast, asked if he wanted pancakes. "Sure," he said. His voice was calm, even, but in his mind, he was already planning the confrontation. Not yet, but soon. He needed one last piece. One undeniable proof. He got it 2 days later. A receipt, from the Airbnb account, for a bottle of wine charged to the room at midnight. The same night as the blood. The same wine bottle Vanessa said had cut her hand. Except the bottle wasn't broken. It was in a trash bin behind the apartment building. Whole, and the blood had been someone else's. That night, Brian didn't go home. He drove to a parking lot near the fire station, sat in the dark, and stared at the photo of Vanessa and Travis again. He didn't feel rage, only a grim sense of duty. Something had to burn, and this time, he wasn't going to stop the fire. The 911 call came in at 12:43 a.m. Vanessa's voice was breathless, high-pitched, and soaked in panic. "There's been an accident," she gasped. "He attacked me. I think he's dead. Please, please, send someone." By the time the patrol officers reached the Airbnb on the corner of 7th and Fremont, Vanessa was curled in a corner of the living room, her white blouse soaked in crimson and her hands trembling like leaves in a windstorm. Travis Carmichael lay motionless on the floor, his torso riddled with stab wounds, a bloodied pair of kitchen scissors on the floor beside his outstretched hand. The paramedics declared him dead at the scene. Detectives arrived within minutes. Vanessa was taken to the precinct without resistance. She repeated her statement in the interview room. Travis had grown agitated when she said their affair had to end. He lunged. She defended herself. The scissors had been the nearest thing. She acted on instinct. He wasn't supposed to be there. She whispered, staring at her lap. He kept saying I belonged to him. I didn't know what else to do. But the scene told a more complicated story. The stab wounds were excessive. 12 in total, 2 in the back. The blood spatter suggested a sustained assault, not a quick, chaotic struggle. There were bruises on Travis's arms from defensive motions. Vanessa had no visible injuries except a faint scratch along her forearm. The lead detective, a woman named Ortiz, watched Vanessa through the two-way glass. "It doesn't smell like self-defense," she said. "Smells like rage." Meanwhile, Brian stood in the lobby of the precinct, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He had arrived 30 minutes after the call went public. Not as a grieving spouse. Not as a man there to bail out his wife. He had one thing in hand, a manila envelope. Inside, copies of the Airbnb receipts, photos of Travis and Vanessa, email exchanges, the unsent draft, and a divorce petition. He waited calmly until they allowed him to speak with Vanessa. When the door opened, and she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "Brian," she whispered, "oh God, I didn't mean for this. I swear I didn't mean." "Stop." He laid the envelope on the table. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "You wanted freedom," he said. "Now you're free from everything." She didn't speak again. As he left, he passed Detective Ortiz. They exchanged a look. Nothing was said, but the understanding was mutual. Vanessa remained in holding. The next day, she was officially charged with second-degree murder. The tabloids jumped on the story. Open marriage ends in bloodshed. From passion to prison. The tragedy of Las Vegas nights. Her face was everywhere. News anchors dissected her past. Podcasts speculated about her motive. Feminist blogs debated self-defense versus ownership. True crime junkies uploaded analyses of her 911 call. But Brian stayed silent. He didn't speak to the press. He didn't respond to texts from old friends. He didn't go back to the fire station. He filed the divorce quietly, moved out, cut off contact. In the court of public opinion, Vanessa had become an icon of caution, a symbol of what happens when boundaries are blurred and desire burns too hot. But in the quiet of her cell, under the flickering fluorescent lights, Vanessa stopped being anyone's symbol. She was just a woman with shaking hands, listening to the ticking of a broken clock. She cried, not out of guilt, but from the weight of finality. The freedom she had once mistaken for empowerment had collapsed into isolation. The man who had known her deepest fears had left her without a backward glance. The man she had sought to escape had become her final chapter. In the courtroom, her lawyer argued diminished capacity, trauma, provocation, but the evidence stacked up like bricks. And with every new angle, Vanessa saw herself more clearly, not as a victim, not even as a villain, just as someone who thought desire could be controlled, who thought rules could protect feelings from human nature. The verdict would come weeks later. But in her heart, Vanessa already knew it, and when the door of the interrogation room finally shut behind her, she didn't flinch, because some prisons are made of steel, and others are made of mirrors. Vanessa sat in the corner of her cell, knees drawn to her chest, chin resting on her arms. The fluorescent light above her flickered with a slow rhythm, casting shadows on the pale cement walls that danced like ghosts with no name. Days had passed, maybe weeks. Time no longer arrived in numbers, but in sounds: the buzz of morning roll call, the scrape of metal trays on the floor, the distant weeping of another inmate whose world had also collapsed. The media storm had calmed. The headlines moved on to newer, bloodier stories. But for Vanessa, time froze in place like a paused film reel. Second-degree murder, that was the charge. A woman scorned, a lover dead, a crime wrapped in sex and secrecy. Broadcast to millions. Some called her a victim of passion. Others labeled her a manipulator. Either way, she was alone now, behind bars, left to sift through the ashes of a fire she once thought she could control. Brian had vanished. No visits, no letters, not even anger, only silence. And silence, Vanessa realized, was worse than rage. It had a weight. It wrapped around her ribs, filled her lungs with something thick and unnameable. She missed the sound of his boots at the door, the low hum of his voice when he talked in his sleep. She missed him not as a husband, but as a witness to the life they'd once built. Without him, it all felt imagined. Then one morning, during mail call, a folded piece of paper appeared with no return address. It wasn't the usual attorney correspondence or a court schedule. The handwriting was uneven, unfamiliar. It read, "You weren't the only one open. He was too, just better at hiding." Vanessa read it once, then again, her breath caught in her throat. But she didn't cry. She stared at the words, as if the ink could unlock a door she'd never known existed. The letter was unsigned, no clues, just 3 lines that rewrote her past in invisible ink. She thought back. Nights Brian came home late. That strange smell once on his collar. The way he'd avoid certain names in conversation. The hesitation in his touch during their last year. She had never questioned him. He was the loyal one. The constant. The man who forgave. Or maybe he just concealed better. Did it matter now? Vanessa folded the letter and placed it under her thin mattress. She didn't mention it to her lawyer. She didn't ask for an investigation. She let it sit like a final puzzle piece she didn't need to complete. Court proceedings continued. The prosecution leaned on the number of stab wounds, the forensic inconsistencies, the evidence of premeditation. The defense built its case around psychological strain, emotional abuse, the unpredictability of human panic. But Vanessa knew what the jury saw. They saw a woman who broke the rules, who turned love into a labyrinth of secrets, who thought she could play with fire and not burn. The verdict came on a rainy Tuesday. Vanessa stood as it was read, her expression unreadable. The words landed, not like bullets, but like bricks, one after the other, building a wall she would now leave behind. Guilty. She was escorted back to her cell. The door clanged shut. No one cheered. No one wept. Weeks passed. She began therapy, reluctantly at first. She met with a prison counselor named Dana who spoke with a calm, detached kindness. They talked about choices, about grief, about illusion. "You kept saying you wanted freedom," Dana said one afternoon. Vanessa stared at her hands. "Yeah, I did. Freedom from what?" She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "From the feeling that I didn't matter unless I was being wanted." Dana nodded. "So you gave yourself away to everyone." hoping someone would keep you. That night, Vanessa dreamed of her wedding. Brian in his fireman's dress blues. Her in a simple cream dress. The sky was clear, the vows were whispered, the world was quiet and full of promise. She woke with tears on her cheeks. Not regret, not remorse, just the grief of someone who finally saw the weight of her own choices. And yet, in a strange way, she felt lighter. The worst had come and claimed her. There were no more secrets left to excavate, no more roles to perform, no more illusions to keep alive. She watched the news one afternoon. A feature on criminal justice reform. A reporter mentioned her case. Her name flashed across the screen. Her face, less glamorous, older now, behind bars. A cautionary tale. Vanessa turned off the TV. She wasn't a story. She was a woman who had loved, lied, survived, and broken, and somehow, still breathing, because not all scars are meant to be hidden. And not all endings mean silence. Sometimes, the final chapter is just sitting quietly, listening to your own heartbeat in a room where no one can see you. And realizing, you are still alive. Some boundaries aren't meant to be pushed. And some freedoms come with the heaviest price. Vanessa believed love could be negotiated, but she forgot, not every heart follows the rules. If this story left you speechless, you're not alone. Subscribe to Infidelity Chronicles, because the next case takes betrayal into your child's bedroom. Coming up next, Mark from Illinois, the babysitter left a message on the baby monitor. A whispered confession, a shattered marriage, and a mother who lost everything over a teenage mistake. Don't miss it. Hit that subscribe button. Truth lives here, even when it's too dark to say out loud.